And so again, the background to this gospel. Jesus was journeying to Jerusalem, his last journey to Jerusalem, his last Passover there, knowing that when he got there, he would be arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. This was the third time he had told his disciples about that event, his death on the cross. So he's just telling them that, and as I said, a pretty heavy conversation. You'd think they'd be pretty sad. Even one time in an earlier prediction, Peter told Jesus, "We'll never let that happen to you." And so he just says, "I'm going to die. I'm going to die." And up comes Jimmy and Johnny Zebedee. And Jimmy and Johnny say, "Hey, by the way, when you die and you get to that kingdom you're talking about, can we be vice president and secretary of state?" You've got to be kidding. Your best friend's going to be murdered in a couple days, and you're worried about your position, your rank. You know, that'd be like visiting someone in the hospice, and they're dying, and their hospice, medical personnel told you they got a couple hours to live. "Oh, before you die, can I have your car?" Whatever. I mean, how callous, how greedy. And so they ask that question. When you get to your kingdom, we want to be right and left-hand side. We want to be the most important people in the kingdom. They were worried about rank and authority and power. They could care less about their friend Jesus and what was happening to him. And so Jesus questions them. "Do you know what it's like to be a member of my kingdom? In my kingdom, you have to work. In my kingdom, there's actually going to be suffering. Certainly in the first 300 years of Christianity, that was true. Are you willing to do that?" And they said yes. And in fact, James did suffer a martyr's death. John died of an old age on an island, exiled from his community. And the baptism that Jesus was talking about was a baptism of fire, where people will hate you and persecute you. And they didn't know what they were saying yes to, but they said yes, so that's good. And then Jesus talks about how we see authority here on earth. He said, the Gentiles. Maybe he's talking about the Roman emperor. Not Jewish, so therefore Gentile. The Roman emperor. He's saying he lords it over others. You know that he is their emperor. You know that he's in charge. You know that he's number one, and you're way, way, way down. That's not my kingdom. In my kingdom, it's all about service and ministry and helping others. We don't hear what their reaction is after that. But then the other 10 were indignant at James and John. And I was reading some commentaries, and your first reaction would be they were thinking, like I said earlier, "How dare you, James and John? Jesus just told us he was going to die, and you're going to be worrying about your rank? How awful of you to do that." But many commentaries said, no, their indignancy was that they hadn't got to Jesus first. And that they said those two, are kind of pushing their way ahead of us. So that's what it's all about. Ministry, service, serving each other in the kingdom. And the final, most beautiful example, of course, was Holy Thursday night, a few days later, when Jesus was going to die the next day. He got down on his hands and knees and washed the feet of his apostles. He said, "Do you see what I have just done? That's what it means to be important in my kingdom. Ministry to others. As I have done, wash your feet. You go and do the same." So we're supposed to wash people's feet. And sometimes I find out that's literal. If you're taking care of your parents or grandparents when they're aging, you have to give them sponge baths and wash them and clean them up, and not very fun stuff to do, but you do it because you love them. It's almost a reversal of roles. When you were a baby, they did all that for you, and now that they're so very dependent, you return the favor. That isn't fun, but it's the right thing to do. It's ministry, it's service, it's love. And so many times we need to look for those opportunities, how to serve each other. When I first met our new bishop, George Leo Thomas, he asked me what I do or where was I. He didn't know me, he didn't know any of the parishes yet in Nevada. So I said, "I'm pastor of Holy Spirit and chaplain at Gorman High School." and director of the diaconate formation program. He said, well, how's that going? I said, well, it's on hold for a while. And he said, no more. No more. And we haven't yet put it together, but what he's saying is we need deacons. We need those men to serve the church. And that's what deacons were started for. They really weren't started to assist me at the altar. I mean, that's nice, and they look good. And when they give the homily, they give me a break because I don't have to prepare one that weekend. But deacons were called, if you remember, because the apostles were so busy, they couldn't take care of the Greek-speaking widows. So they said, we need extra help. So deacons are meant to be service. Pope Francis is looking at women deacons. We know there's precedent for that in the early church. There were women deacons. So that's ordained ministry. Ministry is service. And what is the Pope's name, or title, I should say? Servant of the servants of God. Servant of the servants of God. So whatever your vocation, whether it's ordained ministry, religious life, single life, and married life, it's all about serving each other. So tonight we're going to honor a married couple, friends of mine and friends of many people here in the parish. Now, I give marriage preparation. Maybe some of you have taken that preparation from me. And one of the things we do is we give a test. It's called FOCUS. It's an acronym for Facilitating Open Communication, Understanding, and something else. I forget what the other S stands for. And so it's not a pass-fail test. It's a compatibility profile. And I always tell the couples, anyone can take a personality test and beat it. We got to make ourselves look good to Father Bill so he'll marry us. That isn't the point. You need to be honest. But one of the first statements on the test, and how you take the test, is there's 152 statements that you react to by agreeing, disagreeing, or being unsure. And so then you're compared to Mr. and Mrs. Perfect, who only exist on paper. So one of the early questions is, we agree on the roles that each of us will have as husband or wife in our marriage. And sometimes one agrees, sometimes both agree, sometimes neither, doesn't matter. But I always have, since this is the first question I deal with them, I always start out with this conversation. We agree on the roles of husband and wife that we will have in our marriage. And I say, well, the roles are pretty clear. The husband is the head of the house. The wife has no rights whatsoever. She is not allowed to speak unless spoken to. She is his highest paid servant. And oftentimes the man is just nodding, yeah. I like that, Father Bill. And the woman is just raging. Then I say, everything I just said is a perfect lie. I don't believe in that at all. I believe in the equality of men and women. There used to be gender-based roles. Remember? Man is the outside of the house, woman is the inside. Well, I know many guys that are great housekeepers, great cooks. I know many women that love to work in the garden. Man is the breadwinner, and the woman is the housewife. Most husbands and wives are breadwinners today, just the culture we live in. So there are no gender-based roles left other than birthing a child. I hope that never changes. But equal. And their role is to serve each other. To serve each other. Sometimes even during the wedding mass, if I'm giving a homily and depending on the reading they've selected, I'll say, your role, Gary, in this marriage is to give everything you are and everything you have, wanting to make Debbie the happiest woman in the world. And your role, Debbie, is to give to Gary all that you are and all that you have, wanting to make him the happiest man in the world. And you know that in giving you receive, prayer of St. Francis. In loving you are loved, prayer of St. Francis. That's what marriage is all about. Marriage isn't what's in it for me. Marriage is what can I do for you. That's ministry, that's giving, that's service. How beautiful that is. So that's the challenge from the gospel today. Jesus said, I didn't come to be served. I remember when I commissioned the statue outside of Christ the King. I said I wanted to be our signature statue of Christ the King, but I don't want him sitting on a throne. I don't want him wearing a crown. I don't want him looking royal at all, because his kingship was nothing like that. And so in that statue, Christ is riding barefoot on a donkey, because that's the ministry of service. He came to serve. And so whatever your vocation is, married couples, you serve each other, wanting to work for each other, giving, and you know you always receive, loving, and you always are loved in return. For those of you who are single, the same. Your vocation is to be minister in some way. And perhaps because you're single, you have more time in your hands. Those of us who are ordained ministry and religious life, like Sister Karen, our vocation is to serve others, serve God, and serve God by serving others. So that's what Jesus is saying. It's not about authority. It's not about who's pastor. It's not about who's president of parish council. It's not about who's got all the power here at Holy Spirit. It's all about what can we do for each other. So that's the message and the challenge for today. I wanted to close with a joke someone told me this morning, or a couple of mornings ago, and it has something to do with the wedding anniversary, but not yours. This gentleman comes up to his buddy and he says, I hear you and your wife are celebrating your 50th wedding anniversary. And the guy said, yes. His friend said, well, what'd you do for your 25th wedding anniversary? He said, well, I took her to Hawaii. I said, now that's nice. What are you going to do for your 50th? He said, I think I'll go back and pick her up.